the unnoticed girl. The late afternoon sun was beginning to sink behind the tall buildings of Silicon Valley, painting the streets with a soft golden glow. Cars moved slowly. People hurried home, and in the middle of this ordinary scene, something extraordinary was about to happen. It began with a small misunderstanding at the gates of a well-known international school. The security guards were strict as always. They stood tall, watching each face, checking each name. Among the crowd of students and parents, a quiet young girl waited patiently. Her hair was neatly tied back, her uniform perfectly clean. But there was nothing about her that made her stand out. No one noticed her as she shifted her school bag from one shoulder to the other, looking toward the gate, hoping someone would recognize her. Inside the guard's booth, a list was being checked. The guard frowned slightly, looking at the girl's name. He didn't recognize it. "Wait here," he said, his tone firm. She nodded politely, her eyes calm. She was used to waiting. A group of other students laughed loudly nearby, some jumping into fancy cars, others running to their parents with open arms. No one gave the girl more than a passing glance. To them, she was just another student. Nothing special. But this girl was not just another student. Her name was Kavya Pichai. She was Sundar Pichai's daughter. She didn't carry herself like the daughter of one of the most powerful CEOs in the world. She never told her classmates who her father was. She preferred to be treated like everyone else. But today, that choice was about to lead to a moment no one at the school would ever forget. As Kavya waited by the gate, one of the teachers approached. "Are your parents late again?" she asked in a slightly impatient voice. Kavya nodded softly. The teacher sighed, looked at the guard, and whispered something. The guard shook his head. "She's not on the pickup list," he muttered. The teacher frowned. "But she's here every day," she replied. The guard shrugged. Rules were rules. Without the proper identification or a listed name, no one could enter. Minutes turned into half an hour. Most of the students had left. Kavya remained by the gate, quietly sitting on the bench, her hands folded on her lap. Some of the staff members walked past her without even making eye contact. One of the other parents, dressed in expensive clothes, noticed her and shook her head. "Poor thing," she whispered to another parent. "Some families really need to be more responsible." At that very moment, a black car slowly turned the corner. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy. It stopped a few meters away from the school entrance. The driver stepped out, opened the door, and out came a tall man wearing simple clothes, a plain shirt and dark trousers. There was nothing about him that screamed celebrity or power. His walk was calm, his expression gentle. But for those who knew who he was, it was impossible not to feel a wave of surprise. Sundar Pichai had arrived. The guard didn't recognize him at first. Sundar walked up to the gate with an easy smile. "Good evening," he said softly. The guard nodded back, still focused on his list. Sundar looked around, and then his eyes landed on Kavya sitting alone. The moment their eyes met, her face lit up with quiet relief. She didn't run to him. She didn't shout. She just stood, walked up, and smiled the way children do when they see someone they trust completely. Before Sundar could step inside, the guard blocked his path. "Sir, you need to show identification," he said firmly. Sundar stopped, a little surprised, but he didn't get angry. He reached for his wallet and showed his ID. The guard squinted, confused. He still didn't recognize the name. "You're not on the pickup list either," the guard added. The teacher from earlier approached again. "Oh, he's here for Kavya," she said quickly. "But his name isn't listed," the guard insisted. A small crowd had begun to form. Some parents were curious. Some were irritated. A few students lingered, whispering to each other. No one realized yet who the quiet man was. "It's all right," Sundar said in his gentle voice. "I can wait." He stood by the gate, not demanding special treatment, not using his name to get through. Kavya stood on the other side, watching silently. A part of her felt embarrassed, but another part felt something deeper, a quiet pride in how calm her father was. One of the parents, a man in an expensive suit, grew impatient. "Why don't you let him in?" He snapped at the guard. "He's clearly her father." The guard shook his head. "Rules are rules," he said again. The suited man rolled his eyes. "Ridiculous," he muttered. 5 more minutes passed. Sundar didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He simply waited, his eyes focused on his daughter, reassuring her without a single word. It was this patience that slowly began to catch the attention of the others. Whispers started spreading through the small crowd. Someone pulled out their phone, typed his name into a search bar, and then their eyes went wide. "Wait," they whispered to the person next to them. "Is that him?" In a matter of moments, the energy around the gate shifted. Teachers began whispering to each other. The principal was called. A few staff members hurried out, their expressions suddenly nervous. The principal came running, apologizing profusely. "Mr. Pichai, I'm so sorry," she said breathlessly. "We didn't realize," but before she could finish, Sundar held up his hand gently. "Please," he said, "there's no need for special treatment. The guard is just doing his job." The crowd fell silent. No one expected that. No one expected the CEO of one of the world's biggest companies to respond with such calmness and humility. Many in that moment felt a quiet sense of shame for the way they had overlooked Kavya, the way they had treated her as if she didn't matter. As Sundar finally walked through the gate and took his daughter's hand, the guard stood straight, his face pale. "I'm sorry, sir," he said quickly. Sundar smiled at him. "You have nothing to apologize for," he replied softly. But just as they were about to walk away, a voice came from behind. It was the man in the expensive suit. "This is unbelievable," he said loudly. "You're telling me the world's most famous CEO was standing here all this time and no one recognized him? What kind of school is this?" The principal tried to calm him down, but Sundar turned slightly, his eyes calm yet firm. "Maybe," he said slowly. "It's not about being recognized." The words hung in the air like a quiet thunder. The crowd didn't know how to respond. Some lowered their heads, some simply stared. What none of them knew was that this small moment at the school gate was only the beginning. Something much bigger, much more intense was about to unfold. A misunderstanding at the gate would soon lead to events that would test Sundar's values, his family's resilience, and the world's understanding of what respect truly means. And just as he and Kavya stepped into the car, Sundar's phone buzzed. One message. One unexpected message that would change everything. The screen lit up. He read it once and his expression changed. The gentle calmness shifted slightly. Kavya noticed it immediately. "What happened, Papa?" she asked softly. He looked out of the car window as the engine started. His fingers tightened slightly around the phone. The message was short, only a few words. But those words carried a weight that would pull him into a storm he didn't see coming. And this was only day one. The message. The car moved smoothly through the evening traffic, its quiet engine humming like a soft heartbeat. Kavya sat beside her father, watching the city pass by through the window. She loved these drives home even when they were silent. There was a comfort in knowing he was there, a calmness in his presence. Sundar usually asked about her day, about her friends, about the small things that mattered to her. But today he hadn't said a word since reading that message. His eyes stayed focused on the passing road, his face thoughtful in a way she rarely saw. He wasn't angry, but there was something in his silence that felt heavier than usual. The message on his phone wasn't from a stranger. It was from someone he hadn't spoken to in years. A single sentence had appeared on his screen, unexpected and direct. "They don't see what's coming." No name. No explanation. Just that line. For a man who spent every day solving problems, leading teams, and managing global operations, cryptic messages were nothing new. But something about this one felt personal. It wasn't sent to his official work number. It was sent to his private line, the one only a few close people had, and that alone made his heartbeat change its rhythm. As they approached a red light, Sundar finally looked at the message again. His fingers hovered over the screen, but he didn't reply. He believed in thinking before reacting. Next to him, Kavya broke the silence softly. "Papa, is everything okay?" Her voice was gentle, almost hesitant. He turned to her, forced a small smile, and nodded. "Everything is fine," he said. But even she at her young age could feel the weight beneath his calm words. She looked back out the window, trying to trust his reassurance, but a tiny seed of unease had already taken root in her chest. They arrived home just as the sky turned a deep orange. Their house was simple compared to the expectations people had for a global CEO. Sundar had never liked unnecessary luxury. The gate opened automatically. The driver parked and Kavya ran ahead to greet her mother. Sundar lingered near the car, looking at the message one more time. He could have ignored it, deleted it, or sent it to his security team. But something told him this wasn't just a prank or a careless message. It felt intentional. Inside, the warm light of their living room contrasted the strange chill he felt inside. His wife noticed it immediately. "You're quiet," she said as they sat for dinner. "Long day?" Sundar nodded but didn't explain. He didn't like bringing uncertainty into the house. Family time was sacred to him. He believed in protecting that peace, especially for Kavya. But later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, he sat alone in his study. The city was silent. His laptop screen glowed faintly as he typed the number into a secure trace system. No results. It wasn't registered under any known contact. Whoever sent it knew how to stay hidden. Memories he thought were long buried began to rise. There were only a handful of people from his past who might send something like that. One of them had once been a close friend. Someone who had walked beside him during his early career struggles, someone who disappeared suddenly after a disagreement years ago. Their paths had never crossed again. Until now, perhaps. As he leaned back in his chair, the message replayed in his head again and again. They don't see what's coming. Who was they? What was coming? Sundar had built his life on clarity, on logic, on careful decision-making. He hated riddles that touched his personal life. He tapped his fingers on the table slowly, a habit he had when deep in thought. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing softly against the windows as if carrying whispers he couldn't quite hear. The next morning, Kavya's school was buzzing. Whispers about the previous day had spread quickly. Students who had ignored her before suddenly greeted her with awkward smiles. Teachers who had barely noticed her began offering extra help. The guard from yesterday stood a little straighter when she walked in, but Kavya didn't like the sudden attention. She had chosen to be anonymous because she wanted to build her own identity, not live in her father's shadow. Now it felt like that choice was slipping away. During lunch, a group of students approached her. They spoke politely, but their questions were loaded with curiosity. "Is it true your dad is Sundar Pichai?" one of them asked. Kavya smiled politely but didn't answer. Another said, "Do you get special treatment at school?" She shook her head, quietly wishing the conversation would end. A few tables away, one boy watched her closely. He didn't join the group. His gaze wasn't curious like the others. It was calculating, almost as if he was studying her, waiting for something. That evening, as Sundar left the office, his assistant handed him a sealed envelope. "This came through the internal mail," she said. He frowned. No one used physical mail anymore, especially not inside the company. He took it carefully, feeling the weight of the paper. Inside was a single printed page. No sender, no logo. Just a single line typed in the center. The gate was only the beginning. His heartbeat quickened. His fingers tightened on the paper. Whoever this was, they were watching. They knew what had happened yesterday. They were close enough to follow his family's movements, and that changed everything. He got into the car, his mind racing, but his face remained composed. He had always believed that true strength wasn't in power, but in staying calm when the world tried to shake you. But as the car turned toward home, a strange unease began to grow. Something was building slowly, like a storm gathering in the distance. And this time it wasn't just his company or career at stake. It was his family. When he arrived home, Kavya ran to the door to greet him like always. Her smile was bright, innocent, untouched by the shadows that had started to move around them. Sundar hugged her a little tighter than usual. She noticed. "Papa," she said softly, "why are you holding me like this?" He smiled gently. "Because you're precious," he whispered. But later that night, after she went to bed, another message arrived on his phone. This time it wasn't words, it was a photo. A grainy image of Kavya walking to school that morning. The angle was distant but clear enough to show someone had been watching. The caption below it said only, "Time is running out." His breath caught for just a second. It wasn't panic. It was something deeper, a quiet realization that whoever was behind this wasn't playing games. This was deliberate, personal, dangerous. And in that silent moment, Sundar knew one thing clearly. This was no longer about recognition. This was about something far bigger than he could have imagined, and the real storm hadn't even begun. Shadows at the edge. The following days moved like quiet waves, calm on the surface but with strong undercurrents swirling underneath. Sundar went to work as usual, attending meetings, making decisions, guiding teams across continents. To the outside world, everything seemed normal. His voice in boardrooms remained steady, his smile in interviews warm, his leadership inspiring. But inside, he carried the weight of the messages, the photo, and the unspoken threat. He didn't want to alarm his family too soon, but he knew this was not something he could ignore. Every evening when he returned home, his eyes scanned the surroundings more carefully. He noticed cars parked for longer than usual, unfamiliar faces lingering near corners. Small details that most people would overlook now stood out sharply to him. At night, when the house grew silent, he sat in his study, tracing timelines, old connections, and possible motives. Years of leading one of the biggest tech companies had taught him to see patterns where others saw chaos. This felt like someone testing him, slowly tightening a circle around his life. The message "and they don't see what's coming" now echoed differently in his mind. Who was they? Was it his family? His company? The world at large? Or was it all of them? One evening, while Kavya worked on her homework, Sundar received a call from an unknown number. He hesitated before answering. The line was quiet at first. Then a distorted voice spoke slowly, as if enjoying every syllable. "You have always seen the world clearly," the voice said. "But this time you're looking in the wrong direction." Before he could respond, the line went dead. The sound of the call ending felt like a door slamming in his chest. He stared at the phone for a long moment, then replayed the words in his head. Wrong direction. What direction had he missed? He increased security around the house without making it obvious. The team he trusted handled everything discreetly, installing additional cameras, checking visitor records, reviewing digital traces, but nothing pointed to a clear source. Whoever was behind this was careful, experienced, and strangely personal. This wasn't random cyber harassment. This was something planned. At school, Kavya began noticing subtle changes. Some students acted overly friendly, as if trying to get close for reasons they couldn't fully explain. Others whispered behind her back. The boy who had watched her from a distance earlier continued to keep an unusual interest. He didn't speak to her, but she could feel his gaze like a quiet shadow at the edge of every hallway. One afternoon, while she sat alone under a tree during lunch, he walked by slowly, glanced at her, and gave a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It wasn't friendly. It was knowing. She couldn't explain why, but it made her uneasy. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Sundar found an envelope slipped under the gate of their home. Inside was a printed photo similar to the previous one, but this time it showed him walking with Kavya in the morning side by side. The angle suggested the photographer was somewhere nearby, close enough to follow them unnoticed. Below the image was a single line. "Every step is being counted." The chill that ran down his spine was different this time. This wasn't a distant threat anymore. This was someone watching their daily lives in real time. He sat alone in the living room for hours after everyone went to bed. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock. Even the faint rustle of leaves outside seemed louder than usual. In his mind, he traveled back to his younger years in India, to a time when life was simple, when ambition was pure, when friendship meant something unshakable. One particular face returned to him again and again: Arjun. They had started their journey together, dreamt big dreams, challenged each other, and then one day their paths had split sharply. Arjun had left the industry suddenly, vanishing from public view after a disagreement about ethics in technology. They hadn't spoken since. Sundar wondered now if the shadow reaching toward his family had roots buried deep in that past. Meanwhile, Kavya's quiet life at school was shifting. One afternoon, as she opened her locker, a folded note fell out. Her heart skipped as she picked it up. It wasn't from a friend. The handwriting was sharp, precise. It said, "Some names carry weight. Some names carry danger. Yours carries both." She froze. Her hands trembled slightly. She looked around but saw no one watching. She slipped the note into her pocket and didn't tell anyone that day. Something inside her whispered that this was bigger than playground gossip. She felt for the first time like she was standing at the edge of something she didn't understand. When Sundar came home that night, Kavya was unusually quiet. He noticed immediately, but before he could ask, his security advisor pulled him aside with a serious face. "We found something," he said. They went to the control room where the camera feeds were monitored. The advisor rewound footage from the previous night. At 2:37 a.m., a figure appeared at the far edge of the property. They didn't try to enter. They simply stood there, watching the house, for exactly 3 minutes, then disappeared into the darkness. The face wasn't clear, but the posture, the stillness, the way the person turned their head, it felt deliberate, like they wanted to be seen, but not caught. Sundar leaned closer to the screen. Something about the way the figure stood triggered a faint memory, like a distant voice calling from years ago. He didn't say anything, but his mind began connecting fragments. The figure's presence wasn't random. It was a message. The next morning, as the family prepared for their day, Sundar made a decision. He kissed Kavya on the forehead before she left for school, his smile soft, but his mind sharp. He knew he could no longer treat this as a mystery to solve slowly. It was time to confront the storm before it reached the heart of his home. But just as he reached the office, his assistant rushed in with panic in her eyes. "Sir," she said breathlessly, "something's happened. You need to see this." She handed him a tablet. On the screen was a news alert. A headline in bold letters stared back at him. "Mysterious security breach at top tech firm raises questions." And below that, a photo of their headquarters surrounded by flashing lights and police cars. But what froze him completely was the subtitle underneath. "A name found in the breach connects to the CEO's family." His breath slowed. His hands tightened. The quiet storm had just made its first move. Cracks beneath the surface. The air inside the office was different that morning. Normally, there was a calm energy, a rhythm built on precision, teamwork, and trust. But today it felt heavy, like everyone was holding their breath without knowing why. As Sundar stepped out of the elevator, dozens of eyes turned toward him. Whispers rippled through the open floor. His assistant walked beside him quickly, explaining that the breach had been discovered late at night by the cybersecurity team. Someone had accessed internal servers using sophisticated methods, slipping past multiple layers of protection like water through tiny cracks in stone. But what made it stranger was the name found in the breach, Kavya Pichai. He entered the secure conference room where his top security and legal teams were waiting. The room was tense, filled with quiet urgency. On the large screen was a digital log showing a string of access attempts, then a successful entry, and finally a trace to a file containing personal data. Somehow Kavya's school ID and schedule had been embedded within the code, almost like a hidden signature. No one understood how it got there. Sundar stared at the screen, his mind racing. This wasn't random hacking. This was personal, calculated. Someone wanted him to see this. As the teams discussed possible explanations, Sundar remained silent, his thoughts traveling in a direction no one else could follow. He knew the systems inside out. The breach wasn't just about stealing data. It was designed to send a message directly to him. Every step, from the photo to the envelope to the surveillance figure, had been deliberate. Now this. Whoever was behind it was weaving personal life and professional responsibility into one web, forcing him to confront both at the same time, and that was dangerous. Because it meant they understood him. News of the breach spread fast. Media vans began circling the company headquarters. Analysts speculated on television. Social media buzzed with theories, some wild, some disturbingly close to the truth. Sundar's name was trending globally. He had faced public pressure before, but this felt different. This wasn't criticism of policies or products. This was his family's name dragged into a situation that had no clear boundaries. He stood at the top floor window, looking down at the flashing lights of cameras below. For the first time in many years, he felt a quiet chill deep inside. Not from fear of losing control, but from the realization that someone had found a way to touch the part of his life he had always kept safe. At school, Kavya began feeling the shift too. Students who once ignored her now treated her with a strange mix of curiosity and distance. Whispers followed her in the hallways. Teachers tried to act normal, but their eyes revealed the truth. They had seen the news. During lunch, she sat, alone, pretending to read, but every word on the page blurred together. The boy who had been watching her sat at another table, but this time he didn't hide it. His gaze was steady, almost expectant, like he knew something she didn't. It unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. Later that afternoon, Sundar decided to visit the cybersecurity lab personally. He trusted the team, but he needed to see the raw data himself. The lab was cold and quiet, filled with the soft glow of screens and the rhythmic clicking of keyboards. One of the senior engineers showed him a peculiar fragment in the breach code. "Whoever did this didn't just get in," the engineer said. "They left a path behind like a trail. It's almost like they wanted to be followed." Sundar leaned closer. The fragment contained a series of numbers that, at first glance, looked random. But when he rearranged them in his mind, something clicked. It wasn't a code. It was a date from his past. He left the lab in silence, His memories reached back to that same date, the day of his last argument with Arjun. A quiet afternoon. In a small cafe, two friends turned rivals, one choosing to rise through the system, the other choosing to disappear from it. Their words that day had been sharp, heavy with ideals and betrayals. He hadn't thought of that moment in years, but now, the numbers glowed in his memory like a warning. That night, Sundar returned home later than usual. Kavya was already in bed, but his wife waited for him in the living room, her face calm but her eyes searching his. "Something's happening," she said softly. He nodded. He couldn't hide it anymore. He explained the breach, the messages, the strange trail leading back to his past. She listened without interrupting, her hands folded tightly on her lap. When he finished, she looked at him steadily. "Whatever this is," she said, "we face it together." Her quiet strength anchored him. For a moment, the chaos outside their home faded, replaced by the warmth of shared resolve. But the calm didn't last long. Around midnight, the motion sensors at the gate triggered. Security rushed to the monitors. The same figure from before appeared again, standing in the darkness. But this time, they were closer. They moved slowly, deliberately, toward the camera, stopping just short of the light. Then, without speaking, they held up a small object in their hand, a school ID card. It was Kavya's. Then they placed it gently on the ground and walked away into the shadows. Sundar arrived at the monitor room seconds later. He stared at the paused frame on the screen. The figure's face was still blurred, but their movements told a story. They weren't just watching anymore. They were entering his world step by step, breaking invisible lines. His hands pressed against the table slowly, grounding himself as his mind processed what he had just seen. This wasn't about fear. This was about control. And whoever they were trying to take it away from him. The next morning, just as the sun rose, Sundar received another message. No words, just a live location pin. When he opened it, a map appeared. The pin blinked in a place he recognized immediately, a quiet street near the school. The timing was precise. Kavya was about to leave for school. His heart tightened, not in panic, but in the sharp clarity that comes before a decisive moment. The shadow had stepped closer than ever. Now it wasn't just about watching, it was about choosing, and somewhere in that quiet street, someone was already waiting. The silent chase. The morning light was soft, almost fragile. As if unaware of the tension it had fallen upon, Sundar stood by the window watching Kavya tie her shoelaces. She was humming a tune softly, unaware of the blinking location pin on his phone. Outside, the street looked ordinary. Children heading to school, cars passing by, neighbors greeting each other. But for him, every shadow seemed sharper. Every sound carried a hidden meaning. The blinking pin was less than 2 blocks from the school. A quiet residential street he had walked many times without thinking. Now, it pulsed on his screen like a heartbeat he couldn't ignore. He called his security chief in a low voice. Within minutes, 2 unmarked vehicles were dispatched, blending into the neighborhood quietly. Sundar had always believed in solving problems with reason, not force, but this wasn't a boardroom discussion. This was about his daughter's safety. As the car pulled out of the driveway with Kavya inside, escorted discreetly, he followed in another vehicle. His mind sharp and focused, the city passed by like a blur, every turn pulling him closer to the pin's location. As they approached the street, his driver slowed down. The blinking dot was near a row of old houses, their paint faded, gardens overgrown. The street was quiet, almost too quiet. Sundar signaled the security team to fan out without drawing attention. He stayed inside the car, watching through the tinted glass. A figure stood near a lamppost at the far end of the street. They weren't moving. Their posture was calm, as if they were waiting for someone. Sundar's breath slowed. It was the same figure from the night cameras. The school was just around the corner. Kavya's car turned into the gate, unaware of the silent watch happening behind her. Sundar's vehicle parked at a distance. He didn't want to confront blindly, but something in his chest told him the moment to act was approaching. The figure shifted slightly and then, without warning, began walking toward the school. The security team moved quickly, but the figure didn't run. They walked with the strange confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Sundar stepped out of the car quietly, following at a distance. The morning air felt colder now, as if the street itself was holding its breath. The sound of his shoes on the pavement echoed in his ears like slow drums. The figure turned down a narrow alley beside the school. Sundar followed. His security team moved around to block the other exit. The alley was lined with high fences, empty trash bins, and hanging cables that swayed gently in the wind. Halfway down, the figure stopped. Sundar stopped too, keeping a few steps of distance. The figure didn't turn fully. Instead, they tilted their head slightly, just enough for him to see part of their face. It wasn't clear, but for a brief second, something familiar flashed. A shape, a posture, a memory long buried. "Why are you doing this?" Sundar's voice was calm but firm. The figure didn't respond. Instead, they slowly raised their hand, holding up a small object. It was Kavya's lost school ID. They placed it on the ground, just like they had done at the gate that night. Then they whispered something, too faint to hear, and turned to leave. Sundar took a step forward, but before he could close the distance, a loud noise echoed from the opposite end of the alley. A car engine roared to life. The figure slipped into the shadows and was gone before anyone could block the exit. His security team rushed in seconds later, but all they found was the ID card lying on the ground. Sundar picked it up slowly, staring at it as if it held answers that refused to speak. The calm part of him analyzed every movement, every timing. The personal part of him, the father, felt something deeper. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was communication, like a language written in shadows and silence. Back at the office, investigators traced the live location pin. It was sent from a disposable device designed to self-destruct its data after transmission. Whoever was behind this wasn't careless. They wanted to be found just enough to stay ahead. Sundar sat at his desk, the ID card in front of him, the weight of it pressing against his thoughts. His team spoke in technical terms, but his mind drifted elsewhere. He thought of the date embedded in the breach code, the cafe where he had last seen Arjun, the words exchanged that day. A pattern was forming, slow but undeniable. Every new action pulled an old thread. At school, Kavya sensed the change in her father's mood even though he tried to hide it. She noticed the extra security, the way teachers seemed unusually alert. During recess, she walked near the fence and looked out toward the street. For a moment, she thought she saw the same boy again, standing far away, watching. When she blinked, he was gone. She told herself she imagined it, but her heart didn't believe her. That evening, the house felt quieter than usual. The family sat together for dinner, but conversations were thin. Sundar's wife watched him closely. She knew the look in his eyes, the look of a man who was thinking 10 steps ahead, carrying a storm inside without showing it. After Kavya went to bed, they sat together in the living room. "You think it's him, don't you?" she asked softly. Sundar didn't answer right away. Finally, he nodded slowly. "I think so," he said. "But if it is, then this is only the beginning." Just as he spoke those words, his phone buzzed again. No number, no name, just a short video. He opened it. The screen showed a grainy view of his house from across the street, filmed in real time. The camera slowly zoomed in on a single window, Kavya's room. Then the screen cut to black, followed by a single line of text. "Tomorrow at noon." Sundar's heart didn't race, but his eyes sharpened like steel. There was no mistaking the message this time. It wasn't a warning. It was a countdown. Outside, the night wind carried a quiet tension through the streets. The figure was out there somewhere, waiting. And tomorrow, everything would change. The hour of truth. The morning began with a strange stillness. The sky was pale, almost white, and the air felt heavier than usual, as if the world itself was holding back a breath. Sundar woke earlier than everyone else. He stood alone in the kitchen, watching the steam rise from his untouched cup of tea. His phone lay on the table, the words "tomorrow at noon" still burned into his thoughts. Every second ticked louder than usual, like the clock itself was counting down with intent. He had faced crises before, global ones, corporate ones, moments where the world demanded quick decisions. But this was different. This wasn't about a company. This was about his family. The stakes were quieter but far more personal. The security team had strengthened their presence around the house and the school. Unmarked cars were stationed on nearby streets. Plainclothes agents blended with the morning crowd, and every entrance had been carefully watched. Sundar had reviewed every plan, every route, every possibility. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just about physical safety. Whoever was behind this wanted something more than fear. They wanted his attention, his reaction, his heart in the game. And now they had it. Kavya sensed the shift. She wasn't told everything, but children have a way of feeling things adults try to hide. She noticed the serious faces, the extra cars, the way her father hugged her a little tighter when she left for school that morning. She asked him quietly, "Papa, is something bad going to happen?" He looked into her eyes, and for a moment, his public composure faded, replaced by something raw. "No matter what happens," he said gently, "I will protect you." It wasn't a promise made out of fear. It was said with the quiet strength of a father who had already made his choice. As noon approached, the school grounds buzzed with their usual energy, students laughing, bells ringing, teachers rushing to their next class. On the surface, it was just another day. But behind the scenes, every movement was being watched. Sundar sat in a discreet observation vehicle parked near the school. His security team monitored camera feeds in real time. Every unfamiliar face was tracked. Every car that stopped too long was checked. The tension built slowly, minute by minute, until the clock struck 12. And then it happened. A white van turned the corner and slowed near the side gate of the school. It wasn't suspicious at first. Delivery vans came and went regularly. But the timing was too perfect. One of the security officers whispered into the earpiece, "Van approaching, plate number unlisted." Sundar's eyes locked on the screen. The van stopped. The side door slid open halfway, and for a split second a shadow moved inside. Then the engine started again and it drove off calmly, disappearing into traffic. The team followed but kept their distance. Sundar's instincts told him this wasn't the attack. It was the signal. A few moments later, a figure appeared near the back fence. The same figure who had watched their home, who had left the ID, who had walked through the alley. This time they weren't hiding. They stood tall, almost as if waiting for him to step forward. Sundar didn't hesitate. He left the vehicle and approached slowly, his security team fanning out but keeping their distance. He wanted this confrontation to be face-to-face.